What's up, everyone? Maximilian here, and back from the last week topic of conversation. I'm actually going to be skipping once again in arcade stories to kind of continue the topic that we had from last week, and it was talking about anxiety and competitive gaming. And shockingly, it looks like a lot of you guys actually have gone through similar things that I have. It's kind of refreshing to read the stories of other people, like people that have issues sleeping. Like nowadays, it's funny. I just got off of like a horrible evening where I couldn't sleep until 6 a.m., and then I just essentially stayed up for 2 more hours, and I had to try to go back to sleep. So it's kind of funny how it all became relevant at the moment because of some weird anxiety issues where your body just won't let you sleep. But I read a lot of comments and stories of people that had similar issues with sleeping and anxiety problems and had kind of some similar stuff that I went through, so it's pretty refreshing to read that. What I wanted to talk about from the follow-up from the last video as far as like a competitive career in gaming, or just pretty much a competitive career in general, is kind of an interesting topic. What sprung this topic and conversation on was the last episode of The Fray I listened to. If you guys want to check that out, I'll try to remember to put the link in the description below. But it's a podcast that I do every once in a while with the I Play Winner crew. And last time they had Gutex, Ryan Gutierrez on, who runs Cross Counter. They had Kugi, who runs Broken Tier, and they were talking about like sustainability and being able to stay within like keeping your passion for fighting games and actually making a career out of it. Because Kugi is an excellent example. He made a t-shirt company out of it, and he now sponsors several variety of players. And Gutex has been doing it for quite a long time with Cross Counter and setting up events and YouTube channels and things like that. So what happened throughout this topic of conversation is essentially what happens to a competitive gamer. So the reason I want to talk about this is because this happened to me. This kind of was what happened to me when I was really big into competitive gaming, all the way up until like my mid-20s. And it was kind of like a hobby, and I took it seriously for a while, and then it was a hobby, and then I took it seriously, and it was just on and off. And nowadays, you kind of get this, there's this potential that you can actually reach with being a competitive gamer, where there's kind of like a low probability if you're winning a lot of stuff that you're not going to be winning anymore, depending on new games coming out and stuff like that. And you kind of have to think towards the future as far as what you want to do. If you actually want to make this a hobby, or if you want to do something with it because you love it. Because I think a lot of people, when it comes to competitive gaming, the first thing they see is the money. Is the money that's available to them. Like, I get money for playing video games and being good at video games, and I get huge sums of cash, you know, depending on how big the tournaments are that I win and join. And that's a huge motivating factor. Shockingly, throughout my entire competitive career, that was never the motivating factor for myself. Actually, like, I've been throughout several times in my life where I've had to work full-time, I've had to go to school for full-time, and try to keep competitive gaming in the hindsight and practice a lot with all the games that I love. This is before, like I said, when internet was absolutely huge and YouTube videos were available everywhere and everyone can see what everyone was doing all the time on streams. And this was kind of in my own leisure. This wasn't about like getting on a stream and getting really popular. The only goal you really had was to get to like an EVO main stage and hopefully make it to one of their DVDs or VHS tapes or something like that would come out in the future. So my main goal back in the day for being a competitive gamer was literally just to play the game against good people more. That was my big motivation. That was what I wanted the most, was to play the best people, and that kind of resides nowadays still. There is still this hunger, and there's still this overall attention and drive to beat the best and to play and beat the best. And when I was younger, yeah, that was absolutely my biggest motivation. And it was also a love for the game. When you see, one of the biggest things that really motivated me was the Daigo Perry video. Many people know this, and it's like the most technically popular Street Fighter video ever made. And the Daigo Perry video really did something to me, because it was one of those things where when you're watching it, you didn't know that was even possible. At least I didn't know, because the Third Strike competitive scene back at that time wasn't as big as it grew to end up being, and I think it's mostly because of the Daigo Perry video. But for the most part, like that video kind of like set a spark in me. I'm like, yo, I want to do that. I want to do that, and I just put out this like goal in myself. I started using Ken a whole bunch and things like that, and I got really good at Third Strike over several years. So what I'm getting at with this is that over time, if you're even a competitor and you do good during competitive gaming, the best thing that can happen is that, or one of the best things that can happen is that you win a lot of tournaments. You win a whole bunch of money, you're revered in the community, everyone wants to fight against you, you play money matches on the side, and you essentially get a lot of cash by doing so. But the bigger issue is that through time, and this is the same problem, not just with competitive gamers, it's with regular athletes as well. You can't do that like forever, I guess. This is what actually going into what Kugi and Gutex were talking about during this podcast. And essentially what Kugi stresses to all of his like sponsored players or the players he sponsors is to make them better people. Like, for example, like when you play a lot of video games, and this was true to myself early on as well, you're kind of an introvert. You kind of stay to yourself a lot of the time, and it's you don't really have like a speaking voice, so you don't know exactly how to talk in front of a camera or on a microphone, or to be a publicly presentable person that people actually look up to, you know, when you play games or something like that. Because when you're really good at a video game or something like that, you're like a hero in a lot of people's eyes that want to be just as good as you. So you need to present yourself in a certain way, and that's what Wakugi was going about, saying how you need to better yourself as a person, because once you're in a public eye, especially when you're a sponsored player, it becomes a whole different thing. And a lot of people, when they get a sponsored, like, have to act, or essentially act with a more respectable fashion. You can't, like, start throwing out mad trash talk like you probably would before, because you're essentially wearing a t-shirt with somebody else's company name on it, you know what I mean? So a lot of people don't like that as far as sponsorships go, but for the most part, Kugi went a different approach with it. He's like just advising people and telling them different ways. Like, if you get a camera interview, you should probably do stuff like this. It makes it a lot better and presentable as yourself, because he realizes that you won't be sponsored forever. And hopefully what this sponsorship or working as a competitive gamer can do is increase your skill set in other things, because as just being a guy that's good at video games, that doesn't exactly like work towards anything that you could actually use later. Sure, in some situations it actually can get you a leg in some places, and it's actually really good because people understand your dedication. But for the most part, you can't really put it on many resumes unless you're applying to certain places like Capcom, you know, and they're looking for fighting game people, which happens very infrequently. So what he stressed was to have the person extend their skill set and try to do other things. And this is where the challenge of being a competitive gamer and a content creator like myself come in. And that's what I was doing back in the day with Marvel 3 in the first half of the game's life cycle, where I was trying to compete a whole bunch and make content for the games. That's actually one of the required things that sponsorships or sponsors want people to do if you're competitive, is to like make other content, because quite literally, if you just go into a tournament and like use their arcade stick, or just have your name in front, have their name in front of your name, you know, so when you pop up on the stream or anything like that, that's what people know. That actually isn't what a sponsor really wants. They want their brand and your name out there more often than just tournaments, which is why sponsors like people to make content, to go out there and create content. And what's good about that is that if eventually your competitive career and you don't have the time to practice, or life hits you and you get married, or a really good job or something like that, you can essentially take that skill set of things that you've learned through making content or becoming more presentable, and actually use that and put that on resumes. And it's not like a fighting game is just like about playing the fighting game and that's it. You can essentially build something that is actually beneficial to yourself over the long run. And that's kind of what I was like subconsciously doing when I was really getting into competitive Marvel 3, and even before that, for the most part, because I had been making, you guys know if you have been around this channel for a while, I'd been making fighting game videos for a really damn long time before there was anything close that could have been resembling, quote-unquote, a career with fighting games. And later on, like just now using myself as an example, when it came to Marvel 3, I actually had this skill set where I started directing these shows and stuff like that, and like proper direction and writing and camera work, and getting better at all this stuff like editing and things like that. And throughout that process, like I said, using myself as an example, I was able to somewhat build like a bit of a career around it, because I was contacted by huge companies like Capcom to help promote and market their game for like Ultimate Marvel 3 by making a Assist Me series, and they actually gave myself and the Assist Me crew a budget to make like 6 episodes. And this worked out later on, where I actually got to work with the I Play Winner crew for the Cross Assault like reality show that happened in Street Fighter Cross Tekken a few months after, and other tutorial videos I had worked with Capcom in regards to Street Fighter Cross Tekken on its release, and also the Assist Me series when it came to Retro Assist Me. So there was like multiple projects that I can actually have, you know, the responsibility of putting on a resume: director, writer, like marketing video, like planner, and all this type of stuff that goes on with that, because you essentially are responsible for something big, and there's like a lot of money going into the release of this game, and people like that. So what has happened is that playing fighting games and developing skill sets around playing fighting games and essentially sharing what's awesome about fighting games with people and expressing like the knowledge of fighting games with those same people has led me to like somewhat of a career that can actually help me out down the line, and that actually got me a hosting gig at the Machinima channel that lasted for about like 3-4 months, and it was fantastic and really good. It also got me like a partnership with Machinima and things along that nature. So here's the thing, what Kugi and Gutex eventually went into this situation was that they were kind of painting like, you know, it was kind of being painted like it was a bad picture. Like, if you're going to be a competitive gamer, like, you better know what you're doing, because you can't live off of being a competitive gamer. It's very hard. And it was painting kind of a negative light, but that's not exactly what you should be doing. The best thing you can be doing, and this happens to a lot of athletes as well. You know how you see athletes in real sports and they eventually going to Sports Center, and you see them on like Fox Sports or, you know, anything like that, where they were huge athletes for a long time, and then they move their career into something where it actually involves teaching people about something and making it more presentable to an audience. And that's probably the best way you can go as a competitive gamer. If you're a really hardcore person when it comes to competing in whatever type of game it is, take the things that you have learned and teach people. That's one of the best things, and one of the things that we need more of is you can teach people and build your skill set around that. Start doing things with that, like start editing, start practicing voice work, whatever it takes to get yourself to be more presentable to people, to make people like you, to make people actually want to hear what you have to say about games is a really important thing, because right now there's some people that are like great at games and you just don't want to listen to them because of their mannerisms and the way they talk, and they're hated, and people love them because they're hated for reasons like that. But when this conversation went on, Kugi and Gutex were mentioning how it's about building a career for yourself around being a competitive gamer, because to actually have a legit career being a competitive gamer is really hard. And you can actually do something with it. I was never an extremely successful competitive gamer. I've had my chances. I've won my big tournaments. I've won some crazy things, and I've actually known a lot of people as a result of it. But that isn't what essentially got me into, like, you know, public spotlight as far as people checking out what I did. It was taking that knowledge and putting it into something different, you know, something that I can actually express creatively that got people's eyes. So it's just a little bit of an example story from multiple people that are not myself, and including myself, where you can actually make a career around something you love, like fighting games. And when you build an audience and you get these people to follow what you do and you keep providing content, the biggest problem with that is that that's going to take away from your time where you actually are able to remain competitive. It depends on which one you want to take really seriously. And for me, for the most part, I completely respect the competitive part of it, but when it came to the responsibilities of life and the fact that I can like keep working on this stuff where I can keep competing, I was actually getting a lot more satisfaction out of helping people and watching the response that people would give me. Like when I first started doing this stuff with like the Assist Me series and the Online Warrior series, even though that stuff was super time consuming and it took so much time that it was taking away from the time I actually was spending with the game, I felt like it was deemed worthy of taking time away, because it was introducing people to something that I'd always really liked, and getting people into something was probably the most satisfying part of it. So thank you guys very much for listening and watching the video. If you happen to enjoy it, or you'd like me to cover a topic of conversation within the fighting game community or something controversial or something like that, please let me know. But probably next week I'll jump back into arcade stories, because I've got a few that I can cover and I think would be pretty fun. My name is Maximilian, and I'll see you guys next week.